can get going. So, good morning all, and welcome to our second Breakfast with Relog session on the topic, understanding supply chains in the market. Now, of course, this is a massive topic that we could speak about for the rest of the year, but we have curated today's event with experienced professionals who are able to give the best insights we can possibly give during this time slot. You can see the running order for today on your screen at the moment with each of the speakers' topics. Each presentation will be about 12 minutes, which is to allow a Q&A session afterwards, where the panel will answer any questions from the crowd. So please don't be shy to post your questions through the Q&A box below, as this is really an excellent opportunity. We are testing out something a bit different in the session, which is the addition of an upvote function to the Q&A. So give it a try and please let us know if this function is useful. So without further banter, please let me introduce our first speaker. Gary Bennett has over 30 years consulting experience creating and building supply chain distribution infrastructure. He has played a major role in introducing new systems and technology players into this local South African landscape and continues to assist in the development of their products so that they can best support their customers. To kick off the session, Gary will be giving a high-level overview of supply chain systems. Good morning, Gary.
Morning, Richard. Thank you very much. And just to tell people, there will be a recording of this session available on our webpage. Okay. Now, next slide. Okay, technology. There we go. Okay, so I think availability is an unbelievable phenomenon, what a word, that we take for granted. Okay. It's quite early in the morning. I hope everyone's actually sitting there relaxed. This is not meant to be too formal and death by PowerPoint. It's actually meant to be a conversation with you over breakfast. I hope you've got your croissants and your fruit salad or eggs and bacon lined up. Okay. You walk into a store, you look on the shelves, you see a range of thousands of products. This is something we take for granted, and it's in fact an unbelievable achievement. It's the epitome of our development as a society. Of course, we get upset when one or two items are out of stock, but in fact, the majority is available, and it's still crazy, and even more crazy in these times of COVID. If we look at, for an example, a potato, if you have a field and you grow potatoes, it grows, it comes ripe, and that potato that you've grown is probably a supply chain value. That whole field will service about 2 weeks of consumption. So you've got to be able to plan another field that's going to come 2 weeks later, and continuously throughout the year, there's got to be fields and availabilities of potatoes because we expect potatoes throughout the year. We're working with a company in Kenya, Twiga. They've started to give their farmers IoT devices so they can receive real-time information on the growth and progress to allow better response to their planning. Our whole life is about availability and timing today. And it's important that the symphony of operations that successfully link the supply chain consistently is there to actually make it work. You think about the technology that we have today. When we used to, in the old days, plan to go to a meeting, we estimated it would take half an hour. We got into our car and we drove there, and if we got stuck in traffic or it got worse, we got there 10 minutes early. That was great. Today, you get onto technology last minute, you go into Google Maps or Waze or something, and you're able to get a real-time estimation that changes as you go and updates you so that you can actually update your customer. You're going to be late, get there on time and not waste time. And that's an analogy to our systems where we started to look for the same efficiency in our supply chain. The supply chain is really how raw material is processed, handled, made available to the consumer as you move from left to right. In an ideal world, the consumer opens a tap, everything flows from the supply, but in reality, supply chains are inherently disjointed. It's not possible to have a consistent supply chain or a pipeline to every single customer with every single product available. I suppose in a way, e-commerce is trying to do that you will click on something and it will somehow get delivered. The closest that we think to a pipeline in supply chain is electricity and water. And well, with respect, in South Africa, that doesn't even work that well as well. So let's not get there. But buffers are built into the supply chain to act as a supply safety. So because you can't accommodate the inherent limitations of the supply chain. And it's something that we've seen in COVID now, that supply chains were severely disrupted due to lockdowns and different transport constraints that occurred. So that today the objective of a good supply chain is try and move to a continuous flow as far as possible to the consumer, reduce the inventory, the wastage, the time to supply, but at the same time it's critical to keep the customer happy, okay, with availability and servicing his needs. We need to schedule through the supply chain, the production, the planning and everything that gives us that availability. Okay. Back in simpler times, if you went into a simple store, you may have had 1,000 products if you were lucky. It was easy to manage. The store man that stood out there with his kid, he was in control of planning, procurement, pricing, merchandising, sales. They never gave it titles. It was actually something very simple for him to do. If he was working with apparel, he knew how to stock the red clothes next to the green clothes, next to his mannequin, or if he's in grocery, he knew to place the milk and cheese in a fridge and not the eggs and baked beans. Okay, but what do we have now? Now we have hundreds of stores. We have tens of thousands of SKUs, and it depends what category of business you're in. But if you're in manufacturing or in parts supply or cars, you can have up to 200,000 SKUs. If you're in retail, easily have 40, 50,000 SKUs. And if you're in apparel, very much the same things. And if you're in e-commerce, Amazon lists over 1 million SKUs. So you're across multi-regions, your customers consist of the entire complete population. You're not limited to a couple of 100 meters walking distance from your store. So, and I mean, you take e-commerce, it's the whole world shops on Amazon. And with the scaling, we need to include more buffer, be more smarter in the way we handle that product, okay? And as we add more buffer, we add more waste. Roughly about 1/3 of the world's food is actually not consumed. So what do we need to physically do to fulfill this product at this scale? We build these massive warehouses, create complex transport networks, scale infrastructure, compare this operation to the one guy in his store managing a product in the old days. It's not the same. What do we need to do to physically fulfill this product? We put in automations, and it's much faster fulfillment that comes about with technology, sorters, cranes, people picking with voice, or automated guided vehicles, okay? But we need systems to drive these things. It's not possible to manage the size of operation with human power alone. So since the advent of computers, we're able to automate highly complex operations, and we have been able to allow us to scale, okay? So we only act as humans on the exceptions, act on management reports. And we need to look, there's predetermined trigger points, there's software that we've written, and these are the software we're going to talk about, that come into these systems, and they react to predetermined trigger points to actually drive the process. And going forward with the advent of the 4th industrial revolution, IoT devices, big data, some artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're going to be able to plan and integrate what is happening in the supply chain at a level that was inconceivable previously. We'll be able to do we're doing it right now, real-time tracking and decision-making, and we can make quick and fine adjustments and tuning of our supply chain. But using artificial intelligence and the data that we're collecting, we're able to go into predictive decision-making. And that becomes quite an important part. So what is all the systems that we have in the supply chain? I'm going to hop on this slide a little bit. We have the ERP system, the enterprise resource planning, which includes your pricing, your finance, which generally runs across your whole supply chain, depends on your business and where you sit in the supply chain, but all businesses will have some sort of host master system and ERP system. It's then that you delve down into supply chain level. And at the upstream supplier raw materials side, from if you're a retailer, so on, you're looking at sourcing and procuring product to be able to have the right inventory. You want to have in your warehouse or in your distribution center the right level of inventory. And that's where, so today we have Andrew Blatherwick on the panel, and Andrew's an expert in replenishment and inventory. And it's the foundation of your supply chain to have availability of the right products. If you can optimize your warehouse, you can optimize your transport, but if you don't have availability and don't have the right inventory, you're wasting your time. Or as one of my professors at university said, you'll be urinating into the wind and people will shun you. So coming on to the next one is probably what's common in everyone's mind is the WMS, the Warehouse Management System. And today, the acronyms, we have an acronym overload with the IT people. I used to joke in my early days that put two IT people in a room, and I don't know if you notice how they breathe, and they talk in a different language with acronyms and 3-letter, 4-letter acronyms. And the whole idea behind it is for them to make you think that you're ignorant and they're intelligent, and then all these black box systems do all this stuff. So our job has always been to try to simplify this, understand what's happening in these different systems and make it functional. We look at warehouse management system. To me, you're trying the best warehouse management systems, what we call tier 1, are optimizing the process of warehouse operations, or trying to make sure there's intelligence in the way the system drives the process of the operation to improve productivity, speed of response, accuracy, etc. But today you get simple warehouse management systems that just do the track and trace of where things are. You scan something into a location, it tells you where to go fetch it. You scan it to confirm that activity's taken place. But then more advanced systems will actually route you in an optimum route, will balance workflows between receiving and dispatch, and will do things like interleaving, labor management, etc. And it depends on the scale of your business as to how much infrastructure you need. You get warehouse control systems. That's largely linked to automation and mechanization. That controls the mechanization that you're putting into your system. So if you've got cranes, sorters, conveyor systems, you need that link from your WMS to the WCS to actually tell the WCS to actually do these things when the WMS needs that function to happen. We now have a new system called Warehouse Execution Systems, WES, another acronym just to get us overloaded on. And again, all of WES is really a combination of WMS, WCS into the automation space to be able to take optimization from that. It depends on your scale as to whether you need that. We then look at what do we need outside. About typically in the supply chain, about 60% of your costs are actually in your transport, and the rest is in running the warehouse. And we tend to spend a lot of effort in inventory and running the warehouse, managing that, and we forget about transport. But today we have systems like TRP, transport resource planning, TMS, transport management, we've got scheduling, we've got yard and dock, and all of that looks at how we manage the transport. And if you think about the transport, the yard and dock, if you've got a small operation, you've got 3 trucks, you don't need yard and dock. You maybe need a little bit of a transport management system. And if you're in e-commerce and you've got thousands of deliveries happening, you need a very sophisticated delivery mechanism. But if you've got a big facility, like, for example, a ShopRite or a Woolworths, you've got hundreds of trucks, you need yard and dock to manage where your fleet is, where those assets are, how they are optimized in the way they move on your site. So when they come in the gate, from the point they come into your site, till they get to the door to be loaded, there's different processes, cleaning, waiting for the doors to be available. And all of those are synchronous events that need to be scheduled, very similar to what's happening in the WMS. And the sophistication of these systems will depend on what you need. Obviously, when we go to the stores, you have the point of sale, you have customer management, loyalty program, CRM, and all that feeds into the supply chain to help you get your inventory right, your availability, and your process. And today, if we look at the big data, the machine learning, the AI, the control towers, the IoT, all of that's going to underpin our supply chain and make us have information that's available throughout the supply chain that we can put into, for example, a control tower and have total visibility to make intelligent decisions. And using the machine learning and the AI, you can start to make predictive decisions. I don't know if the AI would have coped with the change that happened from COVID-19 that fast, and we may have been left with our pants around our ankle. But it's going to be an interesting discussion as we move forward. So we have Andrew talking about the inventory coming in. We have our friend Michael Badwi from Manhattan, and he's going to talk about WMS and systems and so on and go into a little bit more detail there. Then I have Steve Smith, who worked in the WMS space but is really starting to help companies in their selection of software. And lastly, we have Cully, and Cully is going to talk about some of the technology that we need to touch on in terms of scanning, RFID, etc. And that's going to influence how we are able to move through these supply chains. So guys, thank you very much. I hope I haven't overrun my time, Richard. And over to the next person.
All right, thank you, Gary, for giving us some background. It's always important to take a step back and understand the context before we delve into the detail. So our next speaker is Andrew Blatherwick. Andrew is the Emeritus Chairman of Relex Solutions and Non-Executive Director of Storeforce Solutions Incorporated and Fido Technologies. Andrew has experience at board level of major retailers, as well as running software solution companies, E3, JDA International, and Agility. Andrew's speciality is in supply chain and replenishment systems, and Relex today is seen as the leading supply chain optimization solutions provider. Andrew is speaking on the topic, optimizing retail for every future. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you very much. If I just share my screen, I hope everyone can now see that.
Yep, looks good. You just need to, yeah, perfect.
Great, okay. Gary, I think you've just blown my mind this morning, because I now realise that I'm an expert in urinating into the wind, which is quite something. So I'll try and get my head around that during the day. What I want to talk about today is where retail is going, what people are doing, what is best practice out there at the moment, and what's happening in this retail world. Let me just tell you very quickly a few words about Relex. Relex Solutions is now the fastest growing, but now one of the biggest software suppliers in looking at supply chain optimization. We use cloud native solutions that look at supply chain optimization, space, promotions, markdown, and into workforce optimization. Gary mentioned AI a number of times, and we are powered by what we call pragmatic AI. There's an awful lot of people out there talking about AI in terms of it being the solution to everything. It's not, it's used, it has its uses, it has to be used in the right way, and it has to be understood that it just does not take over from human beings and everything else. It's part of the whole mechanism. We have offices right the way across Europe, US, Far East, so a true global organization. And we work with some of the biggest retailers, particularly in the grocery area. And if you think about grocery, it's probably the toughest in terms of supply chain, because you have not only those hundreds of thousands of SKUs, but you also have a lot of short life items, a lot of wastage, a lot of promotions, all of which you've got to manage and balance. Now, if you look at retail, retail really is changing. Retail's always been changing. Retail's a very dynamic environment, and it's changed over the years. But if you just look in the last 13 years, 5 out of the top 10 retailers are no longer in that top group of retailers. They're somewhere way down the league. You're now looking at people like Amazon coming into the top 10. You've got Alibaba, but also discounters coming in. So retail is changing again, very dramatically. And again, with COVID, it's changing again, where we're seeing all sorts of different things coming into play. Not only that central line of disruption, power shifts, urbanization, sustainability, all of which has been impacting on retail. But now we've got this massive increase in online. We've got third-party delivery companies suddenly becoming big players, very powerful organizations where even people like Walmart and Target are starting to work with third-party delivery companies to try and manage home delivery. So we've got a new player completely coming into the whole organizational network. We've got things like what the Americans call BOPIS, which I prefer to call click and collect, because we were there first. But you know, if you look at buy online, pick up in store, if you look at curbside pickup, unified retail, these are all areas that are starting to have a big impact in terms of retail. And with COVID, that's changed very dramatically. We're now up to 20+% online, and even in grocery, where 15% is now going online. So standing still isn't an option. We have to make sure that we can manage that, we can get it right, and we can do the right things. Most retailers are data rich, but they're analytics poor. They have so much data, they really don't know what they're doing with it. But one of the big issues is that they tend to operate in operational silos. So they'll optimize one operational silos very often at the cost of another. Now, decision science, AI, and all of the power that we have in computing today, we can improve those core processes, but we still need that transformation, which is required to look at a cross function. The whole idea is it's a supply chain. The word chain means linking. It doesn't mean working in different silos. And the chain has to start working together. We have to understand what are the impacts of one of these silos on another silo. We have to understand how they can work together, because otherwise we get sub-optimization. If each function is looking to try and minimize their own costs, all we do is we create costs in other areas. We need to really bring them together and align the development of our solutions so that they then can give us that added benefit of all of them working together. I remember when I was in retail, I was supply chain director of a very big retailer. I was targeted with reducing my costs as far as I possibly could, making it the most efficient supply chain department possible. I knew I could do that, but what did I do? I just increased the costs in the stores. It was completely counterproductive. Did very well for me because I did very nicely out of it, but actually the store operations director was hammered. It doesn't help. You have to make it all work together. And that's really what RELEX is all about. It's what we as businesses and retailers should be looking at trying to do. So what are the best doing? Well, we have this concept called living retail. I'll just explain the axes on this chart. On the vertical axes, you've got automation, and on the horizontal axes, you then have flexibility. And the balance is all about managing to harness algorithms, managing and using automation wherever possible, but at the same time staying agile, staying quick enough to be able to experiment, to innovate, to adapt. We've just been hearing about how retail's changing. If you're not adapting, you're not going to survive, you will die. Now, Gary mentioned about the costs within a supply chain. It's interesting when you look at where those costs come, and Gary talked about warehousing and transport costs, all of which are very high. But also what we've got to remember is that actually the in-store costs, particularly when we're into stores, 1,000-store chains, are the highest cost we actually have. The last part of moving that inventory, getting the inventory on that shelf and making sure we maintain the presentation, which if you think about it is all important because that's the bit the customer sees, is our highest cost. So everything we're working through that supply chain has got to be trying to look and understand how we minimize all those costs, not just one, and pass costs up and down that supply chain. And if I just show you this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's just some of our customers. And the reason I'm showing this slide is to just show how different customers have different targets. We have someone like Europre, who, yes, they reduced their inventory by 17%, but they were really targeting on trying to decrease their out of stocks and reduce the amount of time and effort they were putting into replenishment. Someone like Bunting were looking at reducing their transport costs. Someone like Rossmann, again, were looking at reducing their promotional overstocks. I come back to something Gary mentioned earlier about waste. Waste is a huge area in food retail. Bunting reduced theirs by 24% just by getting their supply chain right. And a lot of people, there are some massive benefits that can be made by reducing that waste. So how do we get there? Come back to my living retail chart, where it's all about using automation through pragmatic AI, as we've talked about already. Retail is able to use that scale, that we have massive numbers that we can process now, and the efficiency of computing, which someone will talk about later on, I'm sure, allows us to do that very efficiently with massive speed and get some great results. But, and it's a very big but, you cannot just put automation in at the cost of flexibility, because we are changing. We're in a dynamic world and we're changing all the time. So we have to maintain that flexibility. You've got to be able to trial things. You've got to be able to model things. You've got to be able to look at what is happening. And so if I look at how the platform comes together, you start at the base level, which is having all of that data, the computing power, the integration to other systems, back into warehouse management, back into POS data, and all of the other solutions that we have within our business. We then come up a level and we look at that very granular level of forecasting, right down at individual item store level, or item channel level, should I say. We start then to build our plans, we build our projections, and we can project out very long times. And then we come up to that top area, which is our operational area, where we're getting that demand forecast that is then feeding into all those areas of inventory and supply chain, workforce management, promotions and markdown, and space and assortment, because they all have to work in conjunction. The stores need to know when stock is coming down the pipe. The pipe needs to know when stores need that stock. You have to keep our inventory and our supply chain as one, working together. So if I look at this, we bring in collaborative planning back up into the manufacturing environment, where we're helping them to understand what we've got in our supply chain, what inventory we've got at every point, so that we can help them look at their planning, their manufacturing scheduling, so that we can then get that very smooth flow into our warehouses, through our warehouses, as efficiently as possible, making sure we're not overstocked, we've got the right stock seasonally, we've got the right stock in place at the right time, and then coming down, right down into the stores, but not only into the stores now, because we have this added dimension of home delivery, online retail. We have BOPIS, pick up in store, we have curbside delivery, we have all these demand factors that we have to take into account, and we need to forecast all of them as separate channels and then bring them together in our plan. And that's what we're trying to do with our inventory. We're trying to build from one as a foundation level, where we've got our great forecasting and our replenishment and our algorithms that are driving that, so that we can allocate stock where we're necessary, we can actually flow stock where is necessary, and gain a very quick time to money, because that area can deliver some fantastic benefits. But then we've got to move into taking that the next step forward, looking at adding functionality and taking that forward, and then only then can we move into the unified supply chain, where we're bringing all of those elements together to work together to really start to deliver what is a truly world-class supply chain. Thank you very much. I think I'm just about on time. I hope I am. Richard will tell me if not, but thanks for that.
No, thanks, Andrew. You were bang on the time. That slide on seeing how the landscape has changed over the years regarding the biggest players in the industry, that's definitely a powerful insight. And I guess it shows no matter how big you are, you cannot become complacent in the market. So I guess invest in your systems and infrastructure to remain on top.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Next in the roster is Michael Badley, who has over 20 years experience in supply chain software. Michael is the founder of Supply Chain Junction, a software channel partner for Manhattan Associates in South Africa and Middle East. Manhattan Associates is one of the leading tier 1 WMS. Speaking on the topic, warehouse management systems, the future. Michael, thank you for joining us.
No, pleasure, pleasure. Andrew, would you stop sharing your screen, please, so I could share my one? Thanks so much. Okay. Okay, so just checking here, Richard, everyone can see the screen? Okay, you can hear me clearly?
Yep, looks good. You just need to click presentation mode.
I did try that. Let me just try that again. There we go.
Perfect.
Good to go. Okay, excellent. So good morning, everybody. Thank you to the Relog team for allowing me to talk a little bit about the future of warehouse management systems. I think as Gary alluded to in the beginning of his presentation and his opening remarks, WMS, the three-letter acronym, or warehouse management systems, is something that everybody's quite familiar with, not only in the South African market, but in a global context. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about historical things in WMS. I'm going to talk about 3 core areas where Manhattan Associates sees the future of warehouse management system going, and is building its product set out to accommodate those. So, you know, I think from a little bit of background about WMS, they've been around for over 30 years. Manhattan as a company has been around for over 30 years in, you know, has probably one of the most feature-rich and functional WMS product sets out there in the marketplace, and is regarded as a leader in the technology of warehouse management systems. So these 3 core areas are where we see the future of warehouse management systems going. So if we break them down, we have intelligence and optimization, which is really around, you know, optimization of things like the wave, waveless, and flow through capability, but also looking at how we are handling, you know, this new world, which is not necessarily that new, of omnichannel, and reducing order processing times and helping you to optimize your team and resources within the facility. The second area of where we see the future heading is around the fusion of man and machine. And this is where the technology is starting to become really cool. So Gary referred to warehouse execution systems, and we'll talk a little bit about that down the track, but really to have an optimized warehouse, you need to be able to, you know, have all systems and solutions within that facility talking to each other, whether it be the warehouse management software, whether it be the warehouse control systems, whether it be the material handling equipment. And by doing that, you're able to then fully understand how the resources are working to optimize the flow of goods throughout the facility. And the third part to I think where we see the future of WMS going is around workforce agility and efficiency. So those of you who are using or have seen a legacy warehouse management system will be pretty familiar with the old green screen, you know, tab, cumbersome movement of navigation within the warehouse management system and associated tools itself. You know, and we see a couple of trends globally that have really helped us, or helped Manhattan to drive the way that they built out the product. And those trends sort of in Europe and the US are, you know, lack of people wanting to work in warehouses. So they've needed to build out the product set and think about the future of the product set that makes it easy for people to be trained and onboarded very quickly. You know, and if we look in places like Africa, you know, Middle East, where we operate, you know, we see the ability to train and onboard staff is quite a cumbersome process. So making the product set far more intuitive, far more like using your mobile phone, really, far more like using an app in your mobile phone, which pretty much everybody has, allows us to onboard and train and help people really become the best that they can be in the jobs when they're using the WMS. So those are the 3 topics that I'm going to cover in the next sort of 7.5 minutes, and just give you a little bit of overview of each so that you can get a taste for that. If anybody wants more detail on this post the presentation, Gary and his team can share my details, so please just reach out and very happy to give you more information if and when you need. So the first area here is around the intelligence and optimization of the warehouse management system. And people bandy around the terms AI and so forth, but we really do have those capabilities in the solution. And one of the most exciting areas that has come out of the past 2 to 3 years and continues to be an area of focus is this concept of order streaming. So for those of you who have large warehouses and large workforces, you'll be very familiar with the concept of peaks and valleys in order release into your facility. So depending on how many orders you've got in a day and the volumes that you've got, you typically have these spikes of picking activity, packing activity, shipping activity. And that's fine, right? Except for you want to try and smooth and optimize the flow of orders and people inside of the facility. So that's what the order streaming capability is really all about. That is about trying to understand which orders, which tasks, which piece of equipment can be used to optimize and continue to keep flowing orders, tasks, those type of activities through the facility to keep people and machines optimized at the most efficient and prioritized level based on what your customer order needs not only are, but as they change throughout the course of the day, which happens a lot in the e-commerce world. So that's one thing that we think is very exciting for the future and will continue to help companies optimize and improve not only their throughput capability, their cost per unit, but their customer service area. Okay, so just to finish off on that topic, I think the most important thing here is that the old wave fulfillment model still exists, although it's becoming less and less important. We are moving to more of a pull model based on order prioritization, delivery, outbound lead times and planning. And we're delaying the decisions as to, for example, when to trigger a replenishment in the facility based on what we actually need to do from a prioritization perspective and dynamically optimizing those things. And that's really what order streaming is doing inside of the warehouse management system and will continue to advance into the future. Okay, and as you can see here on this slide, we're just re-optimizing every single task, every single priority, and every single sort of piece of feedback to continue to optimize that into the facility and give you the best possible throughput at the lowest possible cost. The second area is the fusion of man and machine. And this is where I think, the blend between warehouse execution system, warehouse control system, and warehouse management system, all three acronyms, WMS, WCS, and WES, really comes together. So in the early days, you would have direct connections between your warehouse management system and your warehouse control systems. And typically a warehouse control system just tells the piece of machinery, move left or move right. Right? And those type of messages were cumbersome and difficult to build out. Then came along the warehouse execution system, okay? So some companies, not all companies, would have three pieces of technology, the WMS, the WCS, and the WES. And integrating those from different vendors became cumbersome, time consuming, and costly, right? So you would perhaps move orders or order statuses between a WMS and a WES. That would then move that through to the various warehouse control systems, such as MHE diverts or whatever path a carton or a tote or whatever needed to take inside of the facility. All of those things, they work fine, but they really did take a long time and were cumbersome. So the way that Manhattan has thought about this is to blend these things together. So this came out 2 or 3 years ago and is continuing to evolve and is really an exciting piece of future technology. Inside of the warehouse management system is an embedded warehouse execution system. Now, what that allows you to do is get a holistic view of not only what's happening from your people, which is where the WMS typically managed activities, but also what's happening with your equipment inside of the facility. So by having that holistic view, you can prioritize and send appropriate tasks and activities not only to associates in the warehouse, but to machines, based not only on what the order type is, but on capacity. So as a very simple example, if a pack station is full, you can divert cartons to a secondary or a third pack station to ensure that that processing capability isn't made redundant and is optimized. So it's a very exciting thing that we have, and we're looking forward to in the future that improving and many more people taking advantage of that. Okay. The third area where we're very, very excited about is around workforce agility and efficiency. So as I mentioned, this is about making the tools just easier to use, not only for your end users, but for your system administrators. You know, historically, configuration of a WMS has been a long and involved process. So, you know, there's a lot of workflows now that are available inside of the WMS to ease that configuration process and make that a far more rapid process so you can deploy more quickly. But also the onboarding process is something that, you know, I mentioned in my opening remarks and something that is really, really important. So what does that look like? For those of you who are used to the old green screens, you'll probably see this as a little bit of a shock, but this is the modern day RF device for the warehouse operatives. Just like you would see in your iPhone or whatever device you're using, it's completely intuitive. Every step is easily seen. You'll see the green ticks next to the activities. You'll see pictures of the SKUs. You'll see pop-up buttons for actions such as short pick, skip pick, whatever it may be. You'll also see that these new devices can actually talk to you. So, you know, voice is a hot topic in the warehouse space. So, you know, some companies using full voice, some are using these devices to actually speak the instructions back to you. Those are those things that are currently available and in the future will continue to get better and are really helping operatives do their job in a more efficient manner. And I think the final sort of area, once we get through some of the, I guess, the labor feedback stuff that is really helping associates on the floor and managers understand what and how their performance is tracking against their goals, is around, you know, a centralized place for your warehouse managers and your department managers inside of your warehouse to not only understand what's happening with the orders, but to also understand what's happening with the equipment. So if you look in the bottom left-hand side of my screen, you'll see we've got sorters, we've got put walls, you'll see the kind of percentage utilization, you'll see the dwell time through that. If you look above that, you'll see what's happening from an employee perspective throughout the course of the facility. And you can actually drill through these things, all tablet-based, because, you know, gone are the days of sitting behind your desk as a warehouse manager and, you know, trying to understand what happens. You need to be out on the floor with your tablet, looking at what's happening in your specific area, looking at what's at risk. And all of this is available now to you and continuing to improve into the future from a feedback and optimization rate, so that you can really work with your employees so that they can do the best possible job and also have a, you know, a happy and safe workplace. So Richard, you know, that's probably enough for me on the future. I could talk for hours and hours on it, but I hope that that gives the audience a little bit of a view into, you know, what is potentially possible now and what's happening into the future.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Michael. It's really an insightfully presented topic, providing a good holistic view on WMS.
Pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to hearing Steve, my old colleague, talk about how to select the WMS.
Right, and with that, our next speaker, Steve Smith, is a founder and managing director at Vail Consulting Services Limited. Steve has previously run the consulting division of Dallas Systems, became the MD of EXE UK, and moved to Manhattan Associates, where he became MD for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Steve has extensive experience in WMS and retail solutions, and today Steve assists companies in their selection of systems and negotiations with suppliers. Steve will be speaking on the topic, supply chain execution software solutions, the vendor selection, and the buying process. Steve, you just appear to be on mute.
Yep, no, I'm just unmuted. There we are. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can see the screen fine. Thanks very much for the introduction, Richard. Appreciate it. Yeah, so it's a bit of, just to follow on from a bit of background there, having worked in the industry for the best part of 30 years, you could call me poacher turned gamekeeper now. I've been helping organisations navigate through this selection cycle and process for quite some time, particularly in the retail sector. And I'm going to share some ideas, some thoughts in terms of how to perhaps go about going through this cycle, number one. And number two, give you a few little key takeaways for further thoughts and evaluation as you go through this entire process. There's certainly a plethora of application architecture out there, supply chain execution software solutions, that you can build around an IT strategy to support your supply chain execution projects and programs. But the complexity really is involved with how to understand what those products do, how they integrate together, and what the buying process should be as you go through that cycle of selection. So I've got a couple of agenda items here, talking a little bit about the vendor engagement process, knowing a little bit more about your vendor. I'm going to focus some time on an area that I'm quite passionate about, which is all around versions and releases, and why that's important when you go through your selection cycle. And then we'll try and summarize. So if you've been through this cycle before, undoubtedly you have followed a pretty structured approach, which is around an RFI or an RFP, and then some sort of detailed selection cycle with a short list of vendors that you go through a detailed cycle. But the key foundation for this process, though, I would say, is that you need to be familiar with it, number one. And number two, you really need to be crystal clear about your requirements. What is it you and your business need? Have you thought through the expectations that you have with regard to the outcome of an evaluation cycle? Have you thought through the business process you're trying to rectify or to fix? Have you thought through what the benefits are that you're trying to achieve? And have you crystallized that within your documentation to these guys so that they truly understand and don't deviate away from what it is you require? I've been involved with many, many cycles where the response to a poorly defined, poorly thought through series of documents or classifications of expectation revert back to a poor response and a lackluster implementation. So please, if you're going through this cycle and you're not familiar with it, seek help and assistance to go through it in the first place. Number one. Number two, make sure that the content of your expectation is clearly defined. That's a normal cycle. You've been through that probably many times. You go through that. However, I think it's also important that you utilize the time you have with the vendors to optimize the potential outcome. And I'll try and pick out a few of these. I'm not going to go through every one, but just to give you an insight, perhaps, of how some of the vendors think, what drives their behavior, and trying to get aligned to that will help you go through the cycle in a more controlled, more disciplined manner. So the first thing here is what's important to them is not necessarily what's important to you. Yes, you're trying to build a business solution capability within your organization, and they will do the same. They'll align to that. But remember, these guys are in the business of promoting and selling software, services, customer support contracts. And that's their primary driver. They have shareholders they need to appease. They have capital advisors and capital investment organizations that need to appease. So even though they are aligned, what's important to them is not necessarily exactly aligned to you. They're very well connected to the ecosystem around the supply chain space from a supply chain execution software perspective. And what I mean by that is that they're well connected to the voice recognition providers, the RF vendors, if it's WMS, transportation execution providers, IT technology providers. They talk to those guys and they integrate the sales cycle in conjunction with those. Be careful what you say to those other partners in the ecosystem about predefined or pre-orchestrated selection. You might be speaking in a relaxed manner to perhaps a third-party vendor, and you say that I've just selected or I'm about to select vendor X. That's what we're going to go forward with. Well, vendor X will find that out, and they'll use that to advantage in the negotiation cycle. If they're public, they have a series of accounting rules that they need to adhere to. There's a few of these. One of those I won't bore you with, but it's called vendor-specific objective evidence. It's quite a complex mechanism around what's possible to be charged from a services rate per hour, and they can't deviate away from those within a range. Understanding those accounting rules helps you to understand what's plausible and what's not. Many vendors use a more for less approach in the negotiation of an agreement. I'll try and explain that a little bit. So you get to a point where you reach commercial negotiation, and instead of a price or cost reduction, the vendor will just try to increase the product portfolio that you might be interested with, but certainly they'll increase the product portfolio as opposed to reducing costs. Now, be careful of those aspects, because increasing the portfolio will increase the potential costs associated with maintenance and support, and it will drive what's commonly known shelfware, which is products you've purchased that sit on a shelf and become unused because you don't really need them. The importance of preference is particularly key. If you get to a situation where you've gone through the cycle of assessment and selection, and you choose a vendor and you nominate them as a preferential supplier, many of those vendors will see that as a we don't move from here from a negotiation standpoint. You've made your decision, you've selected the vendor in all but name, you've called and you nominated them as preferential supplier. They'll then stop to deal with commercial terms, perhaps. So be careful about when you define preference. So a number of these things not necessarily override the whole cohesive approach that vendors have with their customers or their targets, but they're things to bear in mind that differ from your strategy, your approach, and aligning to the way in which the vendors think will help you in this whole selection cycle. From an offer perspective, there are really three primary components, and many others, but three primary components around selection. Generally, the first is licensing. If it's an on-prem deployment, understanding the licensing structure from a user perspective, and what is a user? Are you buying name users? Are you buying concurrent users? Are you buying site-based licensing? What are the restrictions? Understanding those aspects are pretty important. Ensure that you undertake and you understand how to manage through peak trading periods as well. So if you're a grocery retail business and you're running up to Christmas peak, then be sure that the licensing structure enables you to ramp up temporary labor. What is the cost associated with that, if anything, and so forth. If you're purchasing cloud-based solutions, what's the subscription structure? What's the term, exit conditions? How do you expand? You need to understand the deal structure around licensing. From many vendors' perspective, componentized solutions are prevalent. You need to understand what it is you're actually acquiring. WMS products, for example, aren't just WMS products. As Michael said earlier on, there are a number of components that are available. Understand what it is that you are buying. Understand what it is you need for the future. Don't necessarily buy the future now, but negotiate and understand what it is you require and set the price for those now as part of your initial negotiation. Second area of proposition and second area of service is around implementation, training and education and so forth. Understand from that perspective and go through the cycle. Who is actually providing those services? Is it the end provider, vendor, partner, perhaps, or some subcontracted third party? It's important that you have a direct relationship with the organizations that are credible, that have that capability, that are installing the solution on your behalf. Is that proposal fixed price? Is it time and materials? What does that mean? What are the billing rate structures that you need to set for the future? What are the credentials of those service individuals? Do you understand how and where they've used their expertise previously, and is it applicable? If you don't get this right, and this is quite common, and if you don't get the structure right with regard to the requirement definition, this is not unheard of course. Costs in these projects can escalate dramatically. I've seen projects double, triple, quadruple in services proposition costs purely because they're not controlled at the outset and not controlled effectively by the acquirer of the technology. And lastly, support and maintenance, which is really around the post-implementation, or if it's cloud-based architecture, the ongoing promotion of versions. What is it you're getting as part of that process, and what you don't get for your investment? Support and maintenance is an ongoing long-term commitment between the two organizations, the purchaser and the acquirer, and you need to be sure of what it is you're paying for and for how long. The call out here is related to modifications and enhancements. Some vendors will charge an additional fee associated with any mods or enhancements you make to the application over the long term. Understand the impact of that before you make the commitment. I'll talk a little bit later on about research and development and product life cycles, something that I think is worthy of more time. And then lastly, understanding the offer with regard to how is this going to be deployed in your market? Is the product localized and internationalized? Does it suit the market that you're operating in? And does the partner or the vendor have presence and capability to deploy, support, and work with you as part of a process? That is a really, really important aspect of your selection cycle, especially if you're dealing with global organizations. Local presence, localization, whether it's direct or third party or partner, is pretty important when you're building a long-term, multi-year relationship. Other factors, other issues that are quite common, and you may well be familiar with these, but I think are important to call out at this stage. This is quite a fragmented marketplace around supply chain execution software, and continues to be so. We're starting to see the introduction now of more autonomous robotic capabilities within warehouses, and that's going to push the complexity associated with supply chain execution systems for sure. There has been a lot of consolidation in this market, and it hasn't ended yet. If you end up buying a solution from a vendor that subsequently becomes acquired, that can be challenging and problematic with regard to that vendor's focus on that product over the long term. It's pretty difficult and tough to work out who's going to be acquired and who's not. But have a look at their trading record, have a look at their track record in the space, have a look at their research and development investment to get some understanding of their future. If you deal with a company that then gets acquired, you may well be left high and dry with regard to the long term. You need to be sure that the solution's heritage is applicable to you and your organization. And you also need to be very clear about references that they take you to, they invoke and they share with you that are relevant to you. Industry fit is important when you go through this process of selection. Like with like makes sense. So be careful about being shown industry case studies, testimonials that aren't related to you or your organization. And lastly, on this topic of roadmap, it's important to understand what is the roadmap for these products and what is the future for the solution that you're investing in. I'll talk a little bit about more about here. So these are averages, and every vendor has a slightly different approach, and it's this whole cycle of new versions, new releases, new products elapses over different ranges of life cycle. But on average, every 7 to 10 years, you'll find that supply chain execution providers are either through own ambition or through enforced technology changes looking to upgrade their version and or underlying technology stack every 7 to 10 years. So this graph really shows two things really. On the left axis, there's the growth of new customers for a given supply chain execution software solution, and then a period of time over at the bottom. And when a supplier or vendor releases their product in the first instance, that initial product release generates the first customer. An early adopter stage for the first couple of years starts building growth and trajectory for the product. And then there's an ideal range of purchase if you are looking to buy the technology that would suit you best, which is in the middle range of the cycle of development. I'll explain that in a bit more detail. And then you get to this period of late adoption at the end of the cycle. That's where you don't want to be if you're buying this sort of technology. I'll explain why. If after that 7-year period, the vendor decides or is enforced to upgrade their technology, they will start a rewrite or a new technology platform architecture program. And at that point, new customer sales of the old product will stop, or inherently will stop. And product sales for the new solution will start at point 7 or 7 years into the cycle. The older version of the product will then go into what's called maintenance mode. Some of you will have faced enforced end of life trajectories for products, encouraged to be upgraded or changed over time. This is what generally is required because of a new product introduction. In the early stages, you'll get these releases of upgraded products, and at least annually with enhanced functionality and so forth. Version is for SaaS normally, but over the period of evolution of the product, you'll see as these capabilities improve.
Sorry, Steve. Sorry to interrupt. We're just running a little bit short on time. Do you mind wrapping up?
Yeah, sure. I'll just rush through this slide, and then I can summarize that. So when you go through this process, you essentially have two things. When a product is launched, it's technically compliant and current, and the product will grow in functionality but decrease in technical relevance. And that process starts all over again with a new product. So you end up confusing yourself with regard to what product to go on and when. You need to understand where the product sits. So just a bit of a summary, two things here. Make sure you know what it is you want, define it properly. Make sure the vendors show their capability, don't buy futures, verify the cultural fit between you and the organization, And lastly, and probably most importantly, is the lowest price is not necessarily the best. Understand that everything in this world is somewhat comes with, you get what you pay for. So be wary of that. Don't choose lowest price just because it's lowest price. Make sure you go through your cycle and your process in a controlled and effective manner. Thanks very much. Richard, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, that graph towards the end is a great visualization of something that I think a lot of businesses do not realize. You know, that just like physical equipment, software too, in fact, has a shelf life. All right, our next speakers are Kelly van den Berg and Walter Groenewold. Kelly is an executive at Bidvest Mobility South Africa, responsible for representing Honeywell in Africa. And Walter is a pre-sales leader for Honeywell Safety and Productivity Solutions for the Middle East, Russia, Turkey, and Africa regions. Honeywell are the leading provider in connected technologies used in the supply chain, from scanning to RFID and voice systems. The range entails all technologies necessary to make supply chain systems work. Kelly and Walter will be speaking on the topic automatic identification technology for the distribution center. Kelly and Michael, are you there? I mean, Kelly and Walter, are you there?
Good morning, Richard, and morning, everyone. Walter, will you share the slide deck, please?
Walter, are you there? Kelly, it seems like Walter is joining and rejoining again. I do have the presentation on my side. Do you want me to open it?
Please do. If we can start on slide 3, please.
All right, so you just have to give me 1 minute.
While Richard's doing that, if I butt in and I say, with all these systems, I think the important thing is to actually map out your business process before you go into a selection process. Actually understand what your business needs. Often one tries to fit a business to what a salesman has sold you, what the system does, and that may not fit your business, or a way they've installed a system at another business. You need to get your process right of what your business needs, what your objectives are. And I think Andrew clearly showed what the objectives of certain companies were in what they selected of their system. And I'm sure they worked that process through firstly before they actually went to the system selection. And as well as the system selection, it's the system implementation and how you set it up. Any luck, Richard? Are we ready?
Yeah, that was quite a large presentation, but I have it open now and I'm going to share it.
All right, can you go to slide 3, please, Richard? All right, cool stuff, guys. Good morning, Richard. Thank you so much for the opportunity. As we've heard from the other teams, we can definitely see that a supply chain is moving towards the ever-connected supply chain where we need everything to communicate with each other. Sorry, Richard, can you just go one slide up, please? There you go. All right, just a brief summary about Bidvest Mobility. Bidvest Mobility is part of a bigger company, Bidvest. With Bidvest being one of the larger industrial organizations in South Africa, and seeing the benefits of our industry, with that in combination with our experienced team, that enabled us, or we'd like to believe that enabled us to be a leading player in the auto ID field in this African market. We do believe that we have the best value proposition in our market with regards to delivering projects, enterprise projects on a mobile platform to our customers. Just with regards to our presence, we have four main sales and services offices based in Cape Town, PE, Durban, and Johannesburg. Our national footprints allows us to serve our national customers on a national basis. A little bit about our supply chain value proposition from an application perspective. BitVisibility provide various enterprise level applications across the supply chain, which can easily be integrated with most of the available systems in the market. Products, Walter is going to touch a lot on products today with regards to RFID scanning. Our solutions are typically complemented, with industry-leading industrial equipment, which range from the latest Android mobile devices, RFID portals, but go all the way down to barcode printers and scanners, the scanners that you'll see in your retail outlets. We're also a very proud Honeywell Platinum Performance Partner, and Walter from Honeywell will share some of the latest technology available in their portfolio shortly. Our services block, it's the most important component of our ecosystem, and our services and repair capabilities is something that we pride ourselves in. Every BitVisibility office have a vendor certified repair center, which enables us to repair the majority of the products we supply to the market on a regional level. I'm going to ask Walter now to take over just to speak a bit about Honeywell and the product offering. Walter, are you back online?
Yeah, it seems like Walter's having a bit of technical issues. So I think maybe what we should do is just move on to the Q&A. Thank you to all the speakers, and apologies for Walter. But thank you, Kelly, for giving a brief introduction, and hopefully we can get Walter back online, at least for the panel discussion. So with that, let us begin the Q&A session, which I am quite excited for. Hopefully things do not get too heated with the opposing views, so gentlemen, please behave. Just a reminder to the attendees to post any questions that they may have, or upvote a question that they are interested in being answered. Don't be shy.
I think, Richard, your comment about behaving, Steve and myself were on totally opposite sides of the tables about 20 odd years ago when I was a retailer and Steve was trying to sell to me, and here he is now being the policeman trying to help retailers stop me as a software guy. So it's interesting how things change.
It's very strange, yeah. I mean, I do recollect that. I do remember that, actually. I wasn't going to make a point of it, but now but Gary, just one thing. When you mentioned, you're absolutely right, and I don't know if it came through on my presentation. I said, you need to know what it is you want when you go through this site. Be precise about defining your business requirements, and you need to review that.
Steve, you seem to be dropping off. You tend to be dropping off every now and a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll shut up then.
No, please speak, but maybe get closer to your mic or something.
Yeah. So what I was saying was, you were quite right. Maybe it didn't come through in the presentation, but the importance of defining what it is you want, what it is you need, is absolutely paramount in your selection cycle. And what I mean by that is defining your business process, your business expectations, your product flows, and so forth. But don't just be led by the vendor. The vendor's solution should represent some form of best practice, but that's not always the case. You know your business better than anybody else. Don't expect the vendor to guess what it is you require. Make sure you define it accurately.
Yeah. Can I just add to that though, Steve? I think it's also important, and it's implicit in what you're saying, but very often you see customers who try to replicate what they do today. Right. I think what is so important is that they think, what do they want to do and where do they want to go in the future, rather than just try and replicate what they're doing today, which is, there's no point buying a new system if that's all you're trying to do.
No. Whatever you do, do not automate or bad practice. That's just not achieving anything. Right?
Absolutely.
I think, guys, to add to that, often one designs the whole process of a warehouse, or tries to design the operation in a warehouse and best practice, and taking the latest technologies, latest methodologies of working, latest thinking, and then one comes back and says, well, our warehouse management system or our software doesn't do that, and therefore we can't take advantage of that, and you've got to customize or you've got to change. I think the key is, if you're going to try optimize your operation, you've got to be able to have flexibility in the way the software meets what you need. And obviously that software that you need is different depending on the scale of your business. I mean, if you run 5 or 6 little stores and so on, you do not need a sophisticated WMS, procurement system, transport management system. So one must scale what you do, and you do not need to optimize your warehouse labor. You've got 5 people working in the warehouse, and if you save 10% of each person's time, what are you going to do? You're going to have 4.5 people. You still employ 5 people. It's only when you get to scale that one starts to see the benefits. And it's as you get bigger, one then has so much more opportunity to optimize.
I think that flexibility, though, is so important, Gary, because if you think about the average life that a customer has a piece of software for, is somewhere 7 to 10 years, I think you said, Steve. In that 7 to 10 years, your business is going to change dramatically. It's not going to be the same at the end of that cycle than it was at the beginning. And so you've got to understand, when you're looking at a piece of software, you've got to make sure it's flexible enough to grow with you and learn with you and change with you.
100%. You don't want to be left behind. And I mean, at the rate that technology is changing, if I go back 7 years ago, what was available, how we worked and so on, if we had COVID-19 7 years ago, we'd be in a very different position than we are now. I don't think we'd be able to do what we're doing now, is having these online webinars. This technology, timing was perfect of COVID-19, of where we are in our life cycle and our ability to adopt. I think this could have been a much bigger crisis had it happened much earlier in our cycle of technology. And similarly, if you take the analogy to your operations and to where we are, we look at the whole move to e-commerce, how COVID-19 has probably accelerated the acceptance of virtual trade and e-commerce and the way we do business in a different format, probably by about 10 years. Yeah. And, you know, where historically retailers on the e-commerce platforms were looking at your generation Y and X, or whatever you want to call them, the youngsters, the guys that sit on their cell phones on Instagram and TikTok and all these strange platforms, and us older folk look at it remotely. But today I'm looking at TikTok and I'm shopping online and I'm doing everything virtually because I had no choice. I was locked up and I had no choice but to use the virtual more rather than the other process. How are we on questions? Do we start to have some questions coming through?
Yeah, so we have one question through from Madeline Davidson from Sydney. Thanks for joining us. It must be pretty close to nighttime that side. So the question is, any insights into control tower implementations, key learnings, and any watch-outs to be aware of?
Given Madeline's from Sydney, can I take that one?
Yeah, you speak the same language.
Because we know it's beer o'clock in Sydney right now, and they've had beer for a very long time. They haven't had the issue we've had in South Africa.
Madeline says it's wine o'clock.
Well, you know, whatever your poison of choice is, just don't have too many. Then there'll be a problem. So, you know, control towers are an interesting thing, right? Because, you know, it's a consolidation of information across various systems to give you a sort of individual picture. And, you know, a lot of vendors claim that they have a control tower, you know, but I've never really seen anybody, you know, fairly or appropriately provide that single view of the truth across either a common set of systems or a disparate set of systems. So, I mean, a learning and a watch out from there is, you know, don't believe the hype. Be careful and ensure that the data that you want to see in that control tower is carefully vetted, understood, and planned before you start building a plethora of reports because they look pretty.
Does anybody else have anything else to add? Just in general about control towers, because this seems to be quite a big buzzword, especially this year. And I mean, to me, it's not really a new concept. It's just a matter of having some sort of dashboard where you're able to see your entire business. It's almost like you know, if you have your house, and in my case, I've lived in the same house my whole life. It's been about 30 years or something. And in that, you start to accumulate things. You open up drawers and it's just a complete mess. And it's the same with business or retailers. Over the years, you start to accumulate softwares and you try to integrate them all. So there's no like overarching governing system where you can actually see anything. And now we've just called that software that links everything a control tower. Other than that, I don't know how else they can be used besides for visual reporting and dashboarding.
The only thing I'd add to that really is the fact that you know, most organisations of scale will have a BI, business intelligence strategy, which revolves around some core players in the market that provide that analytics capability. But then that's fine. The complexity here is sourcing and integrating the big data elements. And we have many environments, particularly in retail and manufacturing for sure, where we're talking about disparate systems, right? I mean, stuff that's built over many years that's integrated together in some form. If you have a business intelligence strategy, that needs to overarch across all of that architecture in order to consolidate the information into a control tower reporting solution. Not easy necessarily, but it is valuable to operations to have this single point of the truth, single view of operations, integration, activity levels. But it's not an easy task to achieve, not as easy as some would make out. And the control tower functionality that's provided by individual vendors is obviously going to be focused around their information and intelligence, not necessarily everybody else's as well. So this whole building block approach is a necessity, but not as straightforward as one would like.
If I could butt in, I think one of the things about control towers, we have this in cycle of business every couple of years. Someone comes up with a new buzzword or a new terminology where they've grouped something that's been around forever under a new fashion terminology, and control towers is the flavor of the month of terminology that we're using. And again, it becomes down to semantics of what you understand by it. And it's a nice opportunity to take things forward from what we've had before and formalize under control tower some of the technology of the data. Because one of the things we've always spoken about is the data that we have in retail. I think Andrew mentioned it, that the retailers have so much data available to them, and how to use it and to actually manage it. And one of the things we're doing in Relog ourselves is actually building some data analytic tools to run for our customers to actually look at day-to-day measurements, which may feature into the base, into a control tower. It comes down to, going back to what I said earlier, is understand what your needs are for your business. Firstly, what are you looking for in this dashboard? What are you looking for to know across your business? And what would be the links that would trigger different activities across that supply chain? What would be the benefits? And today with technology and all this big data and all this analytics and all this instantaneous tracking, the fourth industrial revolution, having IoT devices throughout your supply chain that now give you the opportunity to know what's happening at a much more discrete level, know when, where, what, how it's happening, gives you information to be able to plan and resolve solutions from that. And I think if one then drives that into what you want your, let's call it the inverted commas control tower, to actually drive your business, drive the links, you then can get something quite interesting in the process. And I think that's going to be that. Madeleine, nice to see you on the call. It's been a long time since we've had engagement. I hope Australia's going well.
There's a question here from Marlene Tarr around when do you decide is the right time to look for a new WMS? So firstly, hi Marlene, nice to hear from you. You know, geez, that's a great question. And I think, you know, it really comes down to, can your business do what it needs to do with the current system, with little or minimal effort? Can the system, you know, adapt to whatever the future is for your business? Can you get the right level of support, you know, from internal and external? And, you know, what is the future that you're looking at in terms of, you know, the distribution requirements that your WMS would need to support. You know, those are really the core elements that I see most companies when they embark on either replacement or selection of a WMS, you know, thinking about. Steve might also have a few things to add to that too.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other enforced changes to in implemented technology, not just the business driver as well. So a technology enforced, well, upgrade or replacement sometimes occurs when the technology is just antiquated, risky, and costly to support on an ongoing basis. You know, there's a major retailer here, starts with T, ends with O, sells food, who still run on a Kix mainframe architecture for some of their WMS. I mean, from an outside looking in perspective, you'd say that's absolutely crazy from a risk standpoint. Whether they get people to support this stuff, well, they take a different stance, they take a different approach, and they build their own internal capabilities. Not everybody's got the option to do that. So when your vendor turns around and says, you know what, that product that we sold you 15 years ago is still in operation and we are not going to support it anymore. Moreover, we actually haven't got anybody that can support it. You're left in a position of high risk. So that can sometimes be the driver for replacement, not just the business drivers, it's sometimes the IT drivers that cause you to rethink your strategy. And that's quite disruptive, because you're not getting any real business benefit out of that. It's an enforced change that just costs and doesn't necessarily embrace what you're trying to do. However, all I would say is if you're in that position, look at it as an opportunity to take a fresh look at what you can achieve going forward and your business functions to try and optimize.
And that's absolutely right, Steve. What you've got to do in that situation is look at it as an opportunity. You've got to be looking at saying, okay, given that I'm forced into this situation, how do I now actually improve my my operation? How do I get some benefit out of it? And that's what you've got to be looking at from that point of view.
I think we sit in South Africa with two of our major retailers running original worldwide chain store systems, which were sort of developed in the late 60s. And they probably are wanting to change, they're forced to change. Technology has moved and so on. I think they run, I can't remember the name of the database and software that they run on in the but today, if you want to try to find someone that's got technology or ability to program in that language, they'll probably be 70 years old.
It's kind of like an abacus, right, Gary?
Yeah. So you are sometimes forced to upgrade and change, but the way it's integrated into businesses is difficult. And at the same time, systems are moving at such a fast pace that the step change from something like chain stores may be absolutely immense to what one of the latest tier 1 capabilities are. Obviously, those systems have been upgraded and kept current with certain things. They have still, they've now added voice and other technologies to it, but they may not be as current as some of the leading systems.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I think the other phrase that someone once said to me, replacing a WMS is like open heart surgery. You don't want to do it, but sometimes you have to do it, and it's a painful cycle to go through, but it's similar. It is problematic. You wouldn't volunteer to do this unless you had to. Or there was a good business driver for doing so. But in the chain stores example, Gary, yeah, I mean, those guys would have been bolting on additional functionality, modules, capability over the decades they've been using it, to the point that it becomes highly complicated to unpick it from their existing. Those problems disappear somewhat to a certain degree when you start talking about cloud-based, SaaS-based architecture and solutions, because they're externalized to the point where the only issue is the integration to it, not the internal management of that application itself. So over the next decade, you'll start to see that problem dissipating a little bit, I would suggest, but it's still not easy. Operationally, it's still not easy to replace.
Yeah, and there's a question there around, you know, how do you choose between a cloud and an on-premise?
And then, Michael, I think we can just tackle these two questions together, because the second one leads on from the first. So the first one is, how do you decide between a hosted system or a cloud-based system? And then Steve from Dublin, in the era when ERP and WMS solutions are moving towards cloud-based solutions, how important is vendor releases, which now designed to be a good deal more seamless than older technologies? And I think that's also the advantage of having a cloud solution over a hosted system. So I think if we could try to address both these questions.
Can I take the well, both of them, but the second of them primarily, which is with cloud-based solutions. You're right. The whole upgrade cycle is very different. The world is full of retailers who haven't taken upgrades over years and become more and more out of date, and that doesn't happen in a cloud-based environment. But also, software's changed dramatically from, if you go back 10 years, the way it's developed, the way upgrades are implemented. And you don't get the massive upgrade where you have to literally almost reinstall a solution today. Upgrades are much more soft than they used to be. They're implemented much more easily, and it becomes more of just an upgrade in terms of training people rather than anything else. So they're not as disruptive as they used to be, and that is a big advantage of cloud.
I think if you take the analogy to our lives today, we all have smartphones that get upgraded automatically overnight while you're sleeping. You wake up next morning, you're running a new operating system, and it works relatively seamlessly. You may have to learn one or new functions as that come up on the upgrade, but generally it's seamless in the process. And I think that's the benefit of where we've moved to technology. I suppose one of the big challenges to cloud-based has always been our bandwidth in the cloud, our bandwidth to technology, and that's part of the drive to what we call the IoT environment, the fourth industrial revolution, with our phasing in of level 5 of the data communications and so on. And if the environmentalists get their way, we'll be reverting back to sending people telexes and letters because they're going to take down all the towers because we're getting COVID because of these towers. I don't know if you remember the beginning of COVID with all of that. So, but cloud-based needs that speed of activity, because if you think about the fast responses that we need in the supply chain, we need this real-time response to be able to work in a cloud-based environment. So coming back to that question, you've got to be able to have the fundamentals in place that a cloud-based system would work with your business.
Gary, there's one other aspect here as well, a technical one, but certainly might help with the decision about whether you have a hosted on-prem or cloud-based solution. And some of the vendors have managed to tackle this actually, but not everybody. And that's the deviation from the base functionality that's deployed on the cloud. So in basic terms, everybody has to work on one version of the truth. Some vendors have managed to externalize variables to that, so that you can still do some of the things that are unique to you and only you, but not everybody's got to that point yet. So back to your point about making sure you understand what your business requirements are and don't deviate from them, but using best-in-class capabilities to support that at the same time. If there are some functions that are absolutely unique to you and nobody else uses, for some vendors, that's a difficult proposition for them to include, because either everybody's got it or nobody's got it. Now, that's not the same with every vendor, but something to be aware of when you're going through this selection cycle of, am I so unique that I can't do what everybody else does?
Yeah. I think that's a very good point, Steve. And that capability has to be built from scratch. You can't add that on later. That needs to be built from scratch in the solution. And that we call it configurability rather than version control. It's not a case everyone has a different version, but there's a configurability that is at local level rather than on the cloud. And that makes it all possible. But that has to be built from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, the other part to that is, what is a cloud solution, right? So,
Private
is it
cloud, public
the server behind a curtain somewhere, or is it a true cloud solution where it is versionless, it is constantly updated, it is a single source of the software, and depending on which vendor you talk to and which product they have, those answers might be different. So, I mean, for the anonymous attendee who asked that question, how do you choose between a hosted and a cloud solution? That is a really great question that requires a long, I think, conversation around what it is that you're looking at, why you're looking at it, and also the kind of vendors that you're looking for. I mean, I would suggest there's many, many benefits around a cloud solution, you know, versionless, never having to upgrade, low cost of IT, but that brings in other costs that you're not potentially used to when you purchase that kind of product from a software vendor. And because now you no longer need the IT department and you no longer need the servers. You know, those costs are built into the SaaS model, right? So, you know, there's a lot of things to consider there, you know.
So
I see we've got two questions running out of time. Hey.
Exactly, but if you gentlemen are happy to stay online to answer them, we can definitely continue.
Sure.
All right, so the next question from Anton Krobler. Environmental factors poses a unique challenge on tech hardware in a freezer cold room warehouse facility. Where are we in ZA in offering capable and tested solutions?
That would be
from a software perspective.
Right?
I think Cully and Walter would be ideal to answer that. Are they still online?
They appear so. Walter also seems to have joined.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, everybody. Apologies for dropping off like that. Steve, on your last slide, you were wrapping up the versions, might be dropped, and I just couldn't get it working again. So how's that for timing? Richard, if you could just repeat the question, then I'll be happy to answer.
Sure. So environmental factors poses a unique challenge on tech hardware in a freezer cold room warehouse facility. Where are we in ZA in offering capable and tested solutions?
Okay, so there are a couple of things when we look at the environmental impact and technologies. We have two solutions that addresses this. The first one is one that I was actually going to cover today, and that is battery-free technology. So as we know, disposing of batteries, you know, has a huge impact on the environment, and one needs to do so in a green manner. Plus the costs associated with that. So we've developed a battery-free technology that we use in our scanners. That uses a supercapacitor that can last up to 20 years. So that's something that's definitely makes a difference in terms of the environment, or the impact on the environment. And then secondly, when it comes to cold storage devices, again, coming down to the battery is actually one of the biggest problems in this area, because the batteries in those temperatures tend to behave in a different manner. They tend to deplete and deteriorate faster, which means that you need to again dispose of these batteries. So in our cold storage units, we have special batteries that are designed for environments, including internal warmers, all kinds of stuff to look after not only the device, but the battery itself, and prolong the life of that battery.
If I can add to Anton with a question, good question. Ideally, what, you know, one tends to say, where are we in South Africa with these things? I think globally we have the same problems. They have cold stores all over the world, and so a lot of the technology is developed to work, and the main thing is to be able to have vendors like Kali that can offer us solutions and not try to patch the wrong solution into your application. And that's where hopefully we come in as consultants to actually make sure that we spec the correct equipment and technologies in that environment.
That's very true. If I can just add to what you just said, Gary, a lot of times I often like to say that you know, can use a knife to tighten a screw, but it's better to use a screwdriver. So even though a lot of our rugged RF units can operate in these minus temperatures, they're not designed for it. So if you're going to over a prolonged period use these devices in the incorrect environment, you will have premature failures on these, which is replacement, the cost, and of course environmental impact. And
just an analogy, I mean, when we buy equipment for freezers and cold stores and so on, specially equipped, whether it's a forklift or a reach truck or something, and a lot of people, we often go to sites and customers didn't even know it existed that you could spec a freezer capable of forklift. They just order one and then they put it in the freezer. And it's about education, not what you don't know.
Yeah.
All right, another question from Camille. Being the largest food banking NPO in SA, our environment is fast-paced due to the short shelf life of products donated. We currently have outgrown our current inventory management system, which is Pastel Partner accounting system, and we are busy with an ERP implementation, which is cloud-based. There's a few constraints involved here, but our biggest challenge is processing donations through the workflow and getting them out to people before the products expire. And then following on from your experience, how can we optimize the inbound and outbound processes? Advice or recommendations, please.
If I could jump in, I mean, that's typically a question that we as consultants would be working in designing your process and then making sure that your WMS ERP system is fitting your operational process, not the other way around. So how do you optimize your inbound and outbound processes? You look at that workflow and you say, what is the correct process that you need on the floor? Is it a cross dock? Is it a flow through? Is it a pick to zero? Is it an allocation system? And how are we doing it in a dynamic manner? And once you've figured out that workflow, then you then got to say, okay, how can our system help us do that? It's not the other way around. I think that's my perspective on understanding that question.
Yeah, I can add something there as well, which, you know, creatively, many organizations have used their technology. I'm trying to think about how to best describe this. They use the technology in a way that wasn't designed to be used, but achieves the same business goal. So that there's functionality or configurable rules which enable you to use perhaps fields that weren't originally designed to be used for a particular function, that if you evaluate with a vendor in enough detail and get them to think a little bit more outside the box, you could get the product to do what you want it to do, but not as it was designed. Now, I'm not advocating that in every case, but that's better than changing, customizing, modifying the product. So ask the vendor to be a little bit more laterally thinking around the business problem, as opposed to just sort of saying, how do I manage donations? Because if that ERP can't do that, there may be some other function in that application which enable you to do the same, support the same business process, but it's just called something else.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Steve, on that. There's lots of ways that you can look at donations and handling them in a slightly different way. You're not going to find a tailor-made solution out there, or a solution that is designed to do what you're trying to do. So I think what you've got to be doing is looking at something that can actually be flexible enough to handle your operation in a different way. But just as Gary said, you need to look at the operation. You need to look at the process that you are trying to build first. Start with that, understand exactly what that process is, and then start looking at solutions that can deliver that.
Right.
I have one last thing. We've come to the end of the questions. Walter's back online with his presentation. If anyone, I see we still have 73 participants. If anyone has time, if Walter can, and if Walter's available, we could let Walter just dive that back into the final presentation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. You want to run a quick poll to see who's going to stick around for that? Or?
Well, you'll see who leaves.
All right. when we're down to 3 people, just let me know so I can stop.
What's nice is we are going to post this recording on our website. So it won't just be for now, it would be, say, for eternity as well.
All right. So I am sharing my screen now.
Yeah, that's good.
So, Cully, I'm going to hand over to you to.
Well, Cully did his part, so.
Oh, he did his part.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I did my work. Now it's your turn.
All right, good stuff. Okay, let me just skip ahead. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for the Relog team for this invitation to speak. I'm going to give you an introduction to Honeywell in case you've never heard of us. We're a Fortune 100 company with our headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, with 110,000 employees in 970 sites worldwide. Our main business is, our businesses are aerospace, building technologies, oil and gas, and productivity solutions, which is the division that I work for. Within SPS, we offer safety solutions, sensors, and IoT components, and we also offer warehouse automation, which includes automated conveyor systems, robotics, etc. And then I'm part of the productivity solutions, which includes mobile computers, barcode printers, scanners, as well as RFID solutions. So I want to briefly examine some of the recent changes in business following the global health crisis. A recent study found that in Middle East region, 90% of consumers in the UAE and Saudi Arabia have shifted almost all their purchases online. There's been a 47% increase in online grocery shopping, and 35% of people shop online more often for products that they would normally buy in store. And then 50% of people consolidate their shopping into less frequent large purchases to reduce or eliminate delivery charges. Next, let's examine the impact COVID-19 had on the global e-commerce business. As you can see, there's been a major shift towards media, telecom, and tech retail, but by far the greatest shift has taken place in supermarket and grocery retail, with that increasing by 161%. Some industries have experienced a decline in e-commerce, like home furnishing, DIY, fashion, and luxury items like jewelry, with tourism and especially the entertainment and events industry suffering the most. So Honeywell offers a range of products and solutions to help address these new business challenges that we face, and also to help minimize the impact that these challenges have on your operations, including software and a whole range of data collection hardware. The devices are rugged, they're reliable, and they offer long life cycles, which help you to drive the overall return on your investment. So before I showcase some individual mobile computers, I just want to introduce you to Mobility Edge, which is a platform that we created upon which a whole family of products are built. So instead of designing individual mobile computers as we did in the past, what we did is we wanted to rather develop a platform, or a single platform where a whole family of products can be developed on that platform. So in order for us to develop this platform, we had to form two key partnerships. The first is with Google, to ensure that we have access to all the parts of the OS that we need to develop on, and also a contractual commitment to offer from version 7 all the way through to Android version 13. So this gives us the ability to ensure that whenever a customer purchases a Mobility Edge product, that we will support the latest OS versions throughout the life cycle. In this example, you will see that a device purchased in 2018 on Android 7 is fully supported with later OS versions all the way through to Android 13, sorry. What makes Honeywell unique is that we extend the product support beyond Google's OS support through our center program. Team is fully supported for over 12 years, which is unheard of today. I see I've got a warning, my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, it just bombed out for maybe 5-10 seconds, but it seems to be back.
All right. Okay, another key partnership that we had to establish was with Qualcomm, who is the chipset manufacturer. Because the chipset manufacturing business is driven by consumer phones, we had to ensure that all the components that we require would be available for the duration of the agreement that we have with them. So what we did is we designed what we call a system on module, or a SOM. And one can regard it as a mini mainboard that houses all the CPU, the memory, all the different radios and everything. And we've got, like I said, the contractual agreement with Qualcomm for these chipsets to be available to us. So what you see here is the SOM, and that goes into a whole family of Mobility Edge products. The nice thing about this platform is that one version of the OS firmware works on all models, which massively reduces the complexity of your IT support. And that also means that software developed and tested on one of these models will automatically work on the other models. So the first product in the family that I want to cover is the CT40, which was originally a one device does all for retail. So this computer can be used in the front of store while engaging with customers, your in-store operations, as well as back of store and inventory management, including RFID options. So we offer various scan engine options, high resolution cameras for the front and rear, a full HD display, and then we also have the SOM that's embedded in the internals, which offers a superior technical features. So next we have the CK65, which is built for the data center. We improved the ruggedness by increasing the drop to a 3-meter drop onto concrete, which makes it the most rugged in its class. You have different keypad options to fit your different software requirements. We have a new battery that gives you 24 hours plus of operation, eliminating the battery swaps that you get during shift changes. That is if you're operating a 24-hour operation, of course. And then Mobility Edge, we also support the latest communication standards. And then we also offer different scan engines depending on your operations. So this could include things like DPM and also near far up to 20 meters away. So the CK65 also comes in 2 specialty models. We have a cold store option for the freezer operations at -30, which I spoke about earlier. And then we also have the non-incentive devices, which are rated at ATEX Zone 2. This is used when handling dangerous, flammable, or explosive product. So next we have the CT60, which is our flagship ultra-rugged full-touch device. This device is typically used in the warehouse and DC, in on-demand delivery, remote technicians, meter reading, and inspection. It also supports different scanning requirements. We've improved the drop to 2.4 meters onto concrete. We've improved the visibility of the screen, particularly in bright sunshine. That could be a challenge in South Africa. 12 hours of battery operation, including a warm swap feature. Fully backward compatible with our previous models, and then also support for MIMO 2x2 over Wi-Fi. So one of our latest inventions is the Flex Range Imager, and this is the first of its kind where we combine the close range speed and aggressiveness with long range scanning. So it supports the widest range of use cases in a single scan engine. For instance, it gives aggressive high resolution scanning at close range, including poorly printed or damaged barcodes. It extends the range to about 3 meters, so you could scan an item in a trolley, and then even extends up to about 10 meters for scanning at a distance, which gives you good productivity gains. The best is that this imager is available on a whole range of products, including the CT40, CT60, our RT10 rugged tablet, as well as the 1990 scanner. So for the customers that are facing tight budget constraints, we also have what we call the value series. Here we have the EDA61K for the warehouse, and also a 7-inch tablet for the called the EDA71, the EDA51K, which is a keypad in-premise or in-field device. And then lastly, the EDA51, which I'm going to feature a little bit more in the next slide. So the EDA51 has been an incredible seller for us in the MERTA region due to its price point and its performance. It's extensively used in retail, and then also the other industries related to retail, like proof of delivery, transport logistics, and also used in healthcare. So just some of the specs are 1.8 gigahertz processor, 4 gigs of RAM, 1.2 meter drop spec, support for the different radios, different scan engine options, again, based on your requirements. And then we also offer a 13 megapixel camera. So next, I want to feature 2 scanning solutions. The first is the Xenon XP range, which has been our most successful scanner over the last couple of years, with over 4 million units sold globally. So the latest version is built on the Xenon Legacy, which has been around since 2009, with various improvements and innovations, including a healthcare version made of special plastics. Then in 2017, we developed the world's first battery-free scanner for wireless scanners, and we launched a new 1950 range with lots of new improvements. There are features and benefits of the Xenon. Superior scanning, including the ability to read damaged or poor printed barcodes, so you can convert passport or ID card information into digital text. 1.8 meter drop to concrete means that it can survive in a tough environment. And then we also have a scanner management utility for remote support. So the Xenon is also optimized for scanning of electronic coupons or loyalty cards on customers' mobile, different lighting conditions, and these all make cell phone scanning quite difficult. So there's an optimized mode which gives it very aggressive performance for scanning mobile phones. Next one, concept that's being rolled out in Europe and the USA. I think the best is to explain it visually. So if we look at this image, the human eye will typically see a box of cereal. But when the Xenon XP looks at the box, it sees a series of barcodes printed all over the box. So this gives you faster results at the point of sale, because it doesn't matter what orientation the product has, you can easily scan it. And then this is available uses including black and white. And then we also have a healthcare. We also have a healthcare version with still antimicrobial plastics, and also a battery-free version. So the battery-free version runs on a supercapacitor, like I mentioned, and this is a green initiative we had. It gives you roughly 450 scans on a single charge. So completely dead, from completely dead to charge to use takes only about 20 seconds. And completely dead to fully charged in less than 2 minutes if you powered over USB. But if you are using a power supply, you can reduce that to 30 seconds. We offer a 5-year warranty on the supercapacitor pack. And then we also estimate that you'll have about a $38 saving by eliminating battery replacements. Require a little bit more rate, so then with some of the performance in the Granite XP is your best option. So it's an ultra rugged scanner with a 3-meter drop to concrete. The scan window is recessed, and we also use Gorilla Glass, which protects that scan window from cracking during heavy use. IP67 sealing, which means that it's used in dusty and wet environments. And then the ultimate test is the tumble test at 7,001 meter tumble. So it's a really, really rugged device. Then we also offer a few RFID solutions within mobile. Honeywell holds 27 of the 30 major RFID patents in the world. And we have a very rich history of RFID innovation. Transform the DC with voice-directed work. So some of the advantages you experience with voice is that you have fast deployment. You have customizable workflows. We can fully integrate the voice with WMS, with existing connectors that we have. And these connectors are available for all the major WMS platforms out there. And then we also offer affordable subscription models, where the entire solution can be acquired via OpEx instead of CapEx. So what is voice and how does it work? Well, firstly, you have a worker who has his hands free and his eyes free, which makes him a lot more safer in the DC. He's also more productive because he can use both his hands without having to put a device down, without looking at a screen, but he can also capture the big quantities while on the move. So how does it work? So the system would instruct him to go to aisle 2. He would say, okay. It would then read a bin location to him, 414, and as he approaches that location, he reads back a unique check digit like 287. That would then confirm that he's at the right location. The system instructs him to pick 2. He would then respond with 2 as he's loading it onto his trolley. And it's a really simple to use hands and eyes free system. This can be used for any operation inside the warehouse. So whether you're talking about receiving, put away, replenishment, cross-docking, all of these functions are supported with voice. So, I mean, that was a lot of information. I'm sorry that I had to rush through it like that today, but we were limited on time due to the technical issues I had. But I felt it important so that you can have a better idea of what we offer and what Honeywell's all about. We're the only AIDC manufacturer that offers a full spectrum of solutions, from software, automated data capture equipment, RFID, and then also intelligent personal protective equipment. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity for speaking today. If we need to engage further at a local level, and also to test our solutions, then please reach out to Kali from the Bidvest Mobility team. And thank you very much.
Guys, thank you everyone for joining us for Breakfast with Relog. And our next Breakfast with Relog
would then read a bin location to him, 414, and as he approaches that location, he reads back a unique check digit like 287. That would then confirm that he's at the right location. The system instructs him to pick 2. He would then respond with 2 as he's loading it onto his trolley. And it's a really simple to use hands and eyes free system. This can be used for any operation inside the warehouse. So whether you're talking about receiving, put away, replenishment, cross-docking, all of these functions are supported with voice. So, I mean, that was a lot of information. I'm sorry that I had to rush through it like that today, but we were limited on time due to the technical issues I had. But I felt it important so that you can have a better idea of what we offer and what Honeywell's all about. We're the only AIDC manufacturer that offers a full spectrum of solutions, from software, automated data capture equipment, RFID, and then also intelligent personal protective equipment. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity for speaking today. If we need to engage further at a local level, and also to test our solutions, then please reach out to Kali from the Bidvest Mobility team. And thank you very much.
Guys, thank you everyone for joining us for Breakfast with Relog. And on next Breakfast with Relog, we will inform you of what the topic will be on. Is planned for Wednesday, the 23rd of September. So if you want to diarize and book time, hopefully we'll have you online on the 23rd of September. Guys, and I want to thank the panelists for giving up their time, especially those in the UK who got up really early to join us. And it was great to see Steve and Andrew again after a long time. And I saved you an 11-hour flight with this new technology. So great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I owe you a dinner though. Hope that we can't do virtually.
That's more difficult. You'll have to come up here, Gary.
Yeah. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
And you, Andrew. Good to see you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Steve. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Walter. Thank you.